Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Philips Racing Pulse webinar. If you're in Europe, good evening. If you're in the US, good morning or good afternoon. And if you're in Asia, thank you for staying up so late. My name is Michael Clerizo from WSJ Magazine. I'll just pause for a moment while you all applaud for WSJ Magazine. In October of 2017, in New York, Philips auctioned a certain Rolex Daytona, reference 6239, gifted by Joanne Woodward to her husband, Paul Newman, and engraved on the back were the words, "Drive carefully, me." The watch sold for an astonishing $17,752,500, a record for a Rolex wristwatch that still stands today. When the auction started, the auctioneer Rel Box called the watch the Paul Newman Daytona. But when the auction finished, he said, "Let us all agree that in the future, this watch will be known as the Joanne Woodward Paul Newman. That's a bit long, but that's okay. And this evening, we're here to talk about another watch, another Rolex Daytona, gifted by Joanne Woodward to her husband, Paul Newman. This one is known as a Big Red because of the enormous size of the red letters in the word Daytona on the black dial. It's a reference 6263, and on the back are the words, "Drive slowly, me." Now, I think we should encourage Arel to call this watch the Woodward Newman Big Red. After all, these watches are unique because of the story behind them, because of the people connected with them, and because they are unique, they deserve special names. And here to talk about the Woodward Newman Daytona with me, the Woodward Newman Big Red Daytona, are Clea Newman, Paul Newman, and Joanne Woodward's youngest daughter, and the consigner of the watch, and Paul Boutros of Philips, head of watches for the Americas, and a senior vice president. And folks, I think we'll start with Clea, and Clea, we'll begin with your name, because you were named Claire Olivia at birth. How did Clea start, and when did it start?
Well, it's actually Clea. And when my mother was pregnant with me, she was reading the Lawrence Durrell Quartet, which is 4 books, Clea, Justine, Balthazar, and Mount Olive. And she decided that Justine had too many N's in it. Justine Newman just didn't sound right. So she decided to call me Clea. Thank God it wasn't Balthazar. And so she called me Clea, or she thought it was pronounced Clea, but a close friend of ours, Gore Vidal, told her that it wasn't pronounced Clea, it was pronounced Clea because E is pronounced A in Latin. So when I was a little girl, people would say to me, "So little girl, what is your name?" And I'd say, "Hi, my name's Clea, C-L-E-A. E is pronounced A in Latin."
Wonderful.
I still do it.
I'm sure you still have to sometimes.
I do.
Now, you're a child of famous parents, wealthy parents. You grew up in a very affluent town in Connecticut. And yet among the many qualities you've inherited from your parents, that you have your mother's voice, is this very prominent devotion to philanthropy. So how did your parents instill this in you? I'm sure there are many people out there who are parents who would like to know how you instill a quality like philanthropy, having to give to other people and children. How did it happen?
To be honest with you, they really just lived it. You know, when you're a child, you learn by example. And both of my parents were incredibly generous with their time and their money, frankly. And it was a very important part of who they were. And when I was a little girl with all of my siblings, actually, you know, there was a big part, you know, a big message from my parents was that, look, you know, we're a really lucky family, and we've been very lucky to have a wonderful life. And part of being a good person is learning how to give back and finding your passion and where you wanted to give back was something that you needed to do as a child so that when you got older, you could really spend your time and energy on it. And, you know, it's a wonderful journey. You know, I was so grateful to find my passion kind of early on. But obviously, I've now kind of branched out, and so I have a lot of different passions. But mostly my passion are camps.
And in addition to philanthropy, your parents instilled in you a sense of independence, that you had to go out and work for things. And in fact, you and your mother once conducted a tag sale during which you coaxed Laurence Olivier into buying something at your tag sale. Tell us about that.
Well, actually, there are a lot of pieces that came into that story. Sir Laurence Olivier was actually staying at our house for the weekend, and my father went to pick him up at the airport. And my mother, I was trying to buy a pony, and the pony was $250. And it was way too much money, obviously, for me. I was probably 9, I think. And so Mom said to me, well, why don't we have a tag sale? And so, we rummaged around the house. I mean, I can't even remember. Who knows what we sold? We probably had like Dad's T-shirts and stuff. And so we had this all laying out on a table. Dad was coming back, it was right on the corner of our house, and Dad was coming back with Sir Laurence Olivier in the car. And right as they crested the hill, he looked at Dad and he said, "My Paul, is that Joanne in the middle of the street?" And Mom was standing in the middle of the street going, tag sale, trying to pull over any car that was coming by. So he very generously and very sweetly got out of the car and bought something little, but was so inspired by the fact that I was working so hard to try to buy this pony, because we had the tag sale for numerous days, that when he flew home, he actually sent me $100 to buy the pony, which was really sweet. Because over the days we had made, I don't know, $150, and I needed 100 left, and so he sent me a $100 bill.
I think the image of your mother, an Academy Award-winning actor, jumping up and down in the street, yelling tag sale, and then your father comes along in the car with Laurence Olivier. They stop, and Laurence Olivier buys something. That's an incredible image. Really beautiful.
Well, they were very hands-on parents. And my dad was, he actually liked going to the airport, because in those days, driving to the airport was kind of fun from Connecticut. Now, not so much.
Now it's much more traffic intensive, isn't it? Driving out there.
Slightly painful.
Let's talk about the watch. Now, it was an anniversary present. Is that correct?
Yes, it was. My mother bought it for my father for their 25th anniversary.
Wow. Now, if people ever saw the watch on your father's wrist, what did they say?
What did they say, or what did he say?
Well, if anyone admired the watch on your father's wrist, what was his response?
Oh, well, typical of Dad, he would always say, Joanne picked this out for me. Joanne has great taste. And she did. I mean, she had very kind of unpretentious taste, and so did he. And so the watch really represented that. It's kind of unusual like them, and it was.
Well, she certainly knows how to choose a watch.
Yeah, she did.
Now, both the watches your mother gifted to your father are chronographs, so they can time things. And why was that so important to your father?
he was an incredibly timely person. He always loved being on time. In fact, he had a talent for being everywhere exactly on time. He was never a second early or a second late. But most importantly, because he was driving then and he was racing then, he loved timing. He loved, timing his drivers. He used to come to my horse shows when I was competing, and he would time me and my competitors. And then he would look up at the timer, at the horse show and say, "See, I told you, my watch is more accurate than this. It keeps better time. It's exactly their time is wrong." Yeah.
And would he do the same thing on a racetrack if he was timing his competitors? Would he say his watch was better?
Absolutely, always. He actually I remember vividly sitting with him in the pits, and I think it was Mario or Michael, but I'm almost sure it was Mario was driving. And we were sitting in the pits and he kept timing because he was doing some pre-track stuff. And Dad looked at me and he goes, we have the car set up perfectly. Look at him. His times are getting better and better and better. He respected the watch because he thought the watch was so incredibly accurate. And to him, because that was so important to him, that made it even more amazing, even more so because Mom gave it to him. But, it was all those things wrapped up.
And you said once he was in the habit of phoning time, which in Connecticut in those days, I think was 555-1212. What would happen when he did that?
Oh, first of all, he would call because he always wanted to know if his watch was keeping time as well as he thought it was. So he would dial. First of all, he would say, "I'm going to call the time and just check it." And he'd look at us, and then he would call and he'd pick up the phone and he'd listen, and then he'd hang up the phone and he'd say, "See, it's exactly perfect." Always. I don't think he ever said it was off even a second.
And this punctuality, this timeliness, did he ever try to impress on you how important that is?
Oh, yes. I'm not the most punctual person on the planet, although I am getting better. He would always say to me, "Punctuality is the courtesy of kings, or the politeness of kings." And then he would point at his watch and say, "See, punctuality is the politeness of kings."
So we don't always inherit all of our parents' characteristics, do we, Clea? One or two might slip by.
No, but I will say that our competitive edge, we did share that. We loved competing, and I loved to do it on a horse, and he loved to do it in a car. But we used to say that we loved competing in anything that was fast. So.
And with all of these things happening, with all of these memories connected to the watch, and there's a story that you were once being interviewed in London, in a restaurant, in a hotel, and you suddenly realized you didn't have the watch with you, and you stopped the interview and ran back to your room to get the watch. So it must mean an awful lot to you, this watch, that you couldn't leave it alone in that room for even 20 minutes. Is that what happened that day?
It did, and actually I was kind of horrified that I left it in the room. And the poor woman who was interviewing me was kind of like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, I'll be right back." And I didn't actually even say what I was doing until I got back and sat down in front of her, because I thought it was kind of a strange thing to do. But the watches, the watch was incredibly important to me because my mother gave it to my father and my father gave it to me. So, you know, just it embodied everything about my parents that is meaningful.
All of their generosity, all of their loving and a long marriage. So it's all in that watch.
I think so. I mean, it, you know, just, you know, mom engraving the back and the fact that dad loved it. He wore it. I mean, he wore it 90% of the time. And when he gave it to me, you know, I didn't realize that he was really giving it to me. But he just kept saying, like, I want you to have it. I want you to have it. And it's funny. I didn't think I was going to be keeping it for any length of time. I thought he would get better when he was sick. And you know, it's still hard to believe he's gone.
Because at that moment when he gave you the watch, he was in the hospital, wasn't he?
He was. He had a procedure and he was doing very well, but he had gone back to the hospital for a checkup. And so I'd gone to visit him. I actually came to bring him breakfast. And he took the watch off. You know, first we were chatting and then he took the watch off and he handed it to me and he said, I want you to have this. And I said to him, well, you know, I'll hold on to it for, you know, I'm like, is it bothering you? I'm like, I'll just hold on to it for, you know, a little bit until you feel better, until you want to wear it again. And he said, no, I want you to have it. And I was like, well, Dad, and he goes, no, I want you to have it. And he said it a couple of times and it, you know, he wasn't big on fanfare. So, you know, nothing was really a big deal. So I just took it and I put it on my wrist and I didn't really think about it. I didn't really think I was going to be, I didn't think I'd have it for any length of time. I thought I'd bring it back and then put it back on, but that's not what happened.
Has the watch made you any more punctual?
It has. I'm still not perfect, but I'm better than I was.
But that is a very
so he was story. Right.
That's a moving story about the time your father gave you the watch. Do you think he was hinting at the fact that the watch might make you more punctual? That
probably.
It was his way of.
It was always very subtle. So,
yes.
Yeah. He always made you think about things, so it's a good thing.
So he made you think about punctuality when he gave you the watch. Hey? That's wonderful.
Oh, always. In fact, it's funny because every time, you know, I'd put it on in the morning and I'd wind it, I would think, you know, I need to be on time. I need to be on time. Dad's watching.
And not only is he watching, but you're keeping time with his watch.
That's why it worked so well.
Well,
there was a little pressure though.
Oh, that's okay. It's okay that our parents keep putting pressure on us throughout our lives, especially about those good things like being on time.
I think so.
So why are you selling the watch now?
I mean, honestly, the world is such a crazy place right now. And I just feel like if Dad was here, he would do something really meaningful and generous for the organizations that were so important to him. And, you know, if I can do anything to support those organizations and to give back, now feels like the right time. And it was a really hard decision. And, you know, I didn't take it lightly. But I feel like it's the right thing to do. So, and I really feel like Dad is looking down and telling me it's a good idea. So.
Tell us a little about the charities that are benefiting from the sale of the watch.
Pardon me, I have horrible allergies right now for some reason.
Oh, okay, sorry. Tell us a little bit about the charities that will benefit from the sale of the watch.
Well, one of them, there'll be numerous organizations, but one of them, there were two that were kind of legacy projects for my father. One of them was Serious Fun Children's Network, which is our family of camps for seriously ill children. We have 30 camps and programs all over the world. They're all free of charge. And my father founded the first camp called Home and Long Gang Camp 32 years ago. We've now served 1.3 million children and families since its inception, which is pretty extraordinary. And the other one is Safe Water Network, which is an organization that was very dear to my father's heart, especially as he got old. A couple of years before he passed away, he, at the time, everyone was concerned about oil and how, none of us were going to have the oil. And Dad, with John Whitehead and Josh Weston, two leaders in New York, business leaders, founded Safe Water Network to bring safe water to developing nations because they felt that water was really going to be the issue globally. They really wanted to take on a big issue, and water was something that he was really concerned about. And he was, even when he was ill, those were the two things that he wanted to talk about all the time. He wanted to know how many more camps were opening, how many more kids were we serving, how many stations were opening at Safe Water Network in India and Africa. It was, just something that kept him going.
Well, those are all worthy causes.
Yeah, there's going to be numerous other ones, but those are two. To me, it's very important for me to support organizations that both my mother and father were passionate about. So.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that.
You're welcome.
And it's good to know watch that provides so many memories for you is now going to go to support so many good causes. That's wonderful. And thank you very much for doing this, Clea.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's really a wonderful thing that you're doing. I don't mean talking to me this evening. I mean selling the watch and donating the money to charity. That deserves. If we were in an auditorium with live people, I'd say that deserves a round of applause. So all of you out there in the audience, you can all applaud what Clea is doing.
Thank you. Well, it's just the right thing. It's the right thing to do. And it feels right. And it feels good. That's the best part about philanthropy is that it, my parents taught me this very young, is that it feels good. It's the right thing to do, but it feels good. And it's exciting to be really passionate about something that serves others. It's just.
Sure. Well, it's a great way to honor your mother and father. It really is. And that's part of what you're doing.
Thank you.
So again, kudos. And now, Mr. Boutros, you're sitting up there in the right-hand corner of my screen. What can you tell us about the Rolex Big Red, reference 6263? Because I know you know all about these things. Tell us about the watch.
Yeah, this watch without the provenance is one of the most sought after of all collectible wristwatches. The Daytona is at the top of the hierarchy in terms of vintage Rolex sport watches desired by watch collectors today. And the modern version of the Daytona The reference 116500LN that so many of our viewers know very well, with the black ceramic bezel and the red Daytona logo right above the subdial at 6 o'clock. That was directly inspired by the big red Daytona that we have here from Clea. So it is a absolutely iconic watch. The vintage version, very sought after by vintage collectors. The modern version, probably the most desirable luxury watch out there. To get one, it's not easy. The modern version, you need to be a good friend of the dealer and have a great relationship with them to be able to have the privilege to buy it at retail. Otherwise, its value on the secondary market is approximately 2 times the retail price. And that's because the look is so recognizable, and the Daytona is just a legendary timepiece in the field of, collector's watches.
And you sold the first Woodward Newman Daytona, as it's now called, in 2017. So between 2017, what kind of conversations did you and Clea have, or when did they start, about selling the Woodward Newman Big Red?
So I believe it was a couple of months after the sale of the first watch, probably late 2017, when I received a call from Clea. Of course, my heart was racing, and knowing who it was, and of course I knew of the existence of the watch. And she was just asking me, Paul, I saw this world record result, and I wear this other watch, the one that replaced it, given to my father by my mom, and it has this wonderful engraving. But I'm concerned because the value, I think, has gone up. And we had these conversations about what she should be aware of as far as its value, as she was wearing it daily. So we had a friendship, and I would keep her in the loop as far as, how are you doing? Me in true hopes of one day getting the piece to be able to offer it for auction, but keeping my hopes subdued because she, I knew how special that watch was to her. We fast forward to 2020, this year, and conversations started to resume. And it seemed that Clea was thinking, the world is in a difficult spot, and I'm thinking about what my father might want me to do. And we had some very informal conversations about a potential sale. And of course, I'm trying to keep my enthusiasm tempered, trying to play it cool whenever we talk. And then maybe a week before the catalog deadline, I got a call from Clea, Paul, I'm ready. Really? And we were thinking through, do we have enough time? Can we get the watch photographed? And then we faced one key obstacle. And the key obstacle was the fact that the watch was in a safety deposit box, and due to the pandemic, the bank was closed. And thankfully, Clea has a good relationship with the branch manager, and they made a special trip to open up the bank so that she can go and collect the watch. And I drove from my home in New Jersey, 2-hour trip, went to where she is right now, sitting in that great grand room in this barn from her parents' home. And a great, very, very pleasant conversation, a lot of questions and answers. And I know how reluctant she was. It was a precious watch to her, but she handed it over to me, and I was in disbelief. Couldn't believe that moment, and absolutely honored, absolutely thrilled that we were entrusted once again to offer the next Paul Newman, true Paul Newman Daytona, one of the ultimate watches of the world.
Woodward Newman Big Red.
You're absolutely right. The next Woodward Newman Big Red Daytona.
So, and I hope when all this was going on, Clea, when you had to go to the bank, and Paul, when you went to pick up the watch, you were wearing masks and were social distancing, of course, weren't you?
Of course.
Yes.
Oh, of course.
Of course. Now, Clea, when the watch in 2017, the first one your mother gifted to your father, sold for that amount of money, and you started to be aware of the world of watch collecting. Were you surprised by how valuable these watches are?
Very. And I am sure that if my father would have thought it was, kind of crazy, which is a little bit part of the reason why I called Paul, because I was concerned. I was wearing it riding, I was showing, I fell off in it, I went swimming, I wore it all the time. So, flying, traveling, and, but yes, very surprised.
Very surprised. And just one particular question. Has Paul ever explained to you exactly what a reference number means? Paul?
I'm figuring it's the reference number to the exact watch, but no, I haven't gotten a full description.
No.
I try not to nerd out with everyone I meet.
Nerd out. Well, you can nerd out here this evening, Paul.
Yeah. You know what?
It's important for me to know.
A little bit of a nerdy conversation here. Yeah, so the 6263, the characteristic of it is the black acrylic bezel where the tachometer is. There's a sister reference, the 6265, with a stainless steel bezel where the tachometer is engraved. Collectors love the black acrylic bezel because it beautifully matches the black on the dial, whether it's the silver dial with the black subdials or the black dial with the white subdials. That tie to the bezel is very much appreciated. But the signature feature of the 6263 in terms of functionality are the screw down pushers, the chronograph pushers that kind of give a greater guarantee for water resistance. Even without screw down pushers, the prior generation 6239, the pump pushers, they were still an oyster, they were water resistant cases. It was the fact that if you wore the watch underwater, you had an easy ability to actuate the pusher on the 6239 and you would inject water directly into the watch. With the screw down pushers, you lock them, you screw them down, and it prevents you from injecting water into the case. So it's a more enhanced water resistance capability. But the coolest thing is how Paul Newman, wearing this particular 6263, you always, in almost all of the photographs, you find that those pushers are unscrewed, giving you the ability to use it. When you screw down the pushers, aesthetically it's more pleasing, but it prevents you from using it. It proves that he always used this to time things. And in my conversations with Clea, she told me that he would often use it to time her equestrian runs, as Clea is a passionate equestrian rider. And he would time, her runs against her competitors' runs. He would use the watch in the pits, timing races. He just used the watch. It was built for him.
Well,
So
there
sorry,
you are.
That was a very nerdy tangent, guys.
Yes.
No.
Clea, now you can tell all your friends what a reference number means when it refers to a watch.
It's important. Absolutely. I actually do remember when Dad taught me how to use it, because it was unusual to learn how to use it. Anyway, it was.
Yeah. Sure, how to press start and reset.
No, the screw down ones, it was different to learn how to use those, because you can't push them and then screw them in, it's a little unusual.
Well, we all have to learn how to tell time, but not everyone is lucky enough to learn how to use a chronograph.
By Paul Newman.
Yes, by Paul Newman. And in its own way, that's quite a nerdy story, Clea. You just told us quite a nerdy little story there.
That's why we get along so well. You see that, Michael?
It is true.
So, and Paul, do you, out of curiosity's sake, do you spend time, when you look for a watch, do you look for provenance? Or is it just the metal, so to speak? Does provenance help?
So what gets me excited most are watches with great stories to tell. So sometimes the watches alone tell a wonderful story, but when the owner is so important and brings the watch to life, before Paul Newman, the Daytona was the worst selling model in the Rolex product portfolio, believe it or not, until the late 80s, when the name Paul Newman got associated with the model, and the manually wound Daytonas got discontinued in the introduction of the first self-winding Daytona in 1988. The Daytona took off in popularity. And here we have a watch from the man himself, worn in the 1980s during the entire growth of wristwatch collecting as a genre. If you looked up Paul Newman and Daytona, you would see him wearing this watch. So this watch is very special in its own way. And yes, so for the watches we hunt for Phillips, we're looking for a lot of things. We're looking for the quality of the wristwatch, the condition of the wristwatch, the importance of the model, the enduring appeal of it. As we know, these things can be appealing for generations. But when they have exceptional provenance, that is the ultimate. And it ticks all the boxes. And we're particularly fortunate in that this one is consigned directly by Clea Newman. It's a two-owner wristwatch, basically, from Paul Newman's wrist to Clea Newman's wrist, and now to the lucky next owner who can carry on the legacy of Paul Newman in a way that's really special, because Clea is donating a significant portion to these charities, doing exactly what Paul Newman would have loved to see happen.
And I'll ask a question. By the way, audience, please feel free to send in your questions for Clea and Paul. Paul, I'll ask you a question. Are you going to tell us who buys this one?
No.
No.
Remember, I used to keep secrets for a living before in my past life. I had a top secret clearance. Impenetrable.
Okay. Well, audience, I can now tell you, in all the years I've been asking Paul Boutrous questions, that is the only time he's answered with one word. Okay.
Sounds like me, because I'm really chatty.
Well, if the subject is watches, you know, we're going to hear more than one word from Paul. Okay, this is a question for Clea. It's rather long.
Okay.
It's from Jim Mercer.
Okay.
Don't know if you know him, Paul, if he's a...
No.
He said, I'm actually wearing a PN 6263 right now, and I'm sitting here very much enjoying, thank you, Jim. We're glad to know you're wearing that. I'm very much enjoying this down-to-earth conversation with Clea. Thank you again. Thank you for the wonderful stories about your father and this watch. But I am also curious as to what your go-to watch is now for day-to-day use for horse riding, etc. Clea, do you have a go-to watch?
Actually, right now I'm wearing the watch that my mother gave me when I was a teenager. I think it was for my 18th birthday. And this is the only problem with this watch is, as beautiful as it is, and I have literally, again, you know, it's a very dainty watch, and I used to wear this riding and fell off in it and did all that too. The only trouble is I get older, I can't see it very well. But I still wear it all the time. I just have to tilt it towards the light so I can see what time it is.
It's a Boucheron branded watch.
Yes, and my father actually gave this to my mother, and then my mother gave it to me when I'm almost sure it was my 18th birthday. But my go-to watch was really, you know, the Rolex, the Big Red. I mean, that was really my go-to. So I've gone back to wearing this one all the time.
But that's in itself is very interesting, because we can see how watches work. And Paul and I are both watch nerds, I'll admit to that. And this is one of the things about watches. So your father gave a watch to your mother has given it to you. It stays in the family. It has a whole history behind it, and it becomes very meaningful.
It is. Those are the gifts that mean a lot to me. So, and I'm funny because I'm not the kind of person that puts things away. I usually wear them all the time. And funnily enough, with the Big Red, the only reason why it was in a safety deposit box was because my husband and I had just sold our house. And I didn't want, while we were moving, I didn't want it to just be like, even though I was wearing it all the time, I just was a little nervous about leaving it anywhere. So I put it in a safety deposit box. So I always wear meaningful things.
Okay. So I've got another question for you, Clea.
Yes.
As far as you know, did your father ever wear the Big Red in the film?
In any films?
Yes.
I think he wore it in most of the films that he did, unless it was a character thing that he, I mean, from the 80s until later. I'm not 100% sure which films he wore, but I remember him wearing that watch more than I remember him wearing any other watch.
Paul, did you ever do any research into that? Did Paul Newman ever wear the watch in a film that you know of?
So we didn't spot it on an actual film, but we know he wore it on the set of The Color of Money. As there's pictures of him with Tom Cruise, having that watch on his wrist, holding Tom. So it's definitely was worn probably while filming, but maybe didn't make an appearance on the screen that we found. But we didn't look very hard, I have to admit.
Well, The Color of Money is the right time, isn't it? Because it's an 86 film, I believe. So
something like that, yes.
Yes. And it's appropriate to his character in that film.
Well, that's the thing. If it wasn't appropriate to the character, then he may not actually wear it in the film, but
yeah.
He wore
because he was definitely a sensitive enough actor to know what his character would wear.
I hope so.
It's very true. We have another question coming in. This one is from Robin Thielander. Where would you like the timepiece to go next? Let's give that one to Paul first, and then we'll ask you the same question, Clea. Where would you like the timepiece to go next, Paul?
I'll answer this from a personal, non-Phillips hat perspective. I'd love to see it go to a museum of some sort where it could be seen and enjoyed by many. Or if it's not an institution that purchases it, a museum, I'd love to see it go to someone who is a true watch lover, that is very passionate about watches, that shares his collection with close friends and family, doesn't tuck it away in a drawer, but wears and enjoys it, and is actually a good person who appreciates and understands the charitable aspect of it. That's where I'd love to see it go.
Clea, do you have a preference about where it should go next?
I think I'm probably with Paul on that. I hope that, I mean, if it doesn't go to a museum, I hope it goes to somebody who is not only a great watch collector, but also somebody who appreciates my father and my mother and who they were as people, and understands the philanthropic side of it, because that's a very important part for me, at least. And I hope somebody enjoys it, because to me, watches are meant to be worn. If they're not in a museum, they're meant to be worn. And so I hope that somebody enjoys it.
Well, I think we'd all be with you on that one, Clea. It's good if a watch.
I mean, I loved wearing it, and it's a great watch, which is, you know, it is incredibly accurate, and so it's a good watch.
There are Rolex dealers all over the world right now who are jumping up and down with joy at the mention of the Rolex accuracy. But yes, we hope all of us, I think, can share that. I'd like the watch to be used. I'd like to see it on someone's wrist to know they're using it. As your father
are meant to be worn, you know. That's what makes them such great timepieces, is that they're beautiful to look at, but they're so accurate. I mean, they're great watches. So that's just my 2 cents, and I'm not even a watch nerd.
No, Clea, it sounds to me like you're getting into this watch nerdiness a little bit. It sounds to me like you could be in the early stages. Just believe me.
You guys have rubbed off on me.
When the bug bites, Clea, be prepared. It doesn't let you go. Now we've got another question coming in from someone named James Cox.
Oh.
Who that could be.
James.
Cox.
Hi, James.
Hi, James. For the audience, James Cox is the gentleman who consigned the Rolex Daytona 6239 in 2017. And that the one that fetched $17,752,500. I'm very proud of the fact I memorized that figure.
You are a star.
I'm impressed.
Number.
So let's see James's question. Visiting Paul on the set of movie shoot in Malibu, working name Twilight, in 1998, I noticed he had a set watch, but would switch back to the Big Red after the day's shooting. This is an example of how important the Big Red was to Paul. He wouldn't leave it in the movie trailer overnight, just as Clea could never leave it in her hotel room. Like father, like daughter.
Oh.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, James.
Well, James.
That's certainly
Hi
true.
from afar.
And lovely to hear from you, James. And that is a very much appreciated comment. We'll have to get someone looking up, find out what film your father was working on in 1998 in Malibu.
I did. I think it was Twilight.
Was it?
I think the film was called Twilight.
Okay. All right, there aren't any other questions yet. So, okay, there we are. Now, it was great to hear from James.
Absolutely.
An old friend. And certainly someone who started this whole thing off. Paul, the auction is on Saturday, correct? December 12th?
Exactly. Saturday, December 12th, 10 a.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. Central Europe time, 3 p.m. UK time where you are, 7 a.m. Pacific time, and 11 p.m. Hong Kong time.
And tell us how this is going to work, because it's not a typical online auction, is it?
No, this is a live auction transmitted online, so anyone from around the world can watch it. Just visit phillips.com on the day of the auction, and at 10 a.m. you can start to watch the sale live, 10 a.m. Eastern time. You can download the Phillips app on an iPad or iPhone and watch it easily there. We're actually going to have Aurel in London with a team of specialists who flew from Geneva to be with him in our gallery studio on Berkeley Square, actually auctioneering remotely because of the difficulty that he would have had to travel into New York. We'll have a team of specialists here in New York doing telephone bidding, and you can watch us all live. Regrettably, we can't have anyone in the auction room in New York City due to COVID, but I can assure you we'll have thousands of people around the world watching live and bids will, every watch will be up for bidding during that live auction. It's not an online auction, it's a truly live auction. You can submit your bids online, via telephone, or via absentee bidding.
I'm so sorry I won't be able to be there with you guys.
Yeah, we'll miss you for certain. We'll miss Michael, of course, who's been to our auctions in New York. And of course, we miss the community of watch lovers who we always look forward to seeing this time, auction season. But we are very hopeful for next year with, high hopes that we can welcome you in person once again.
Yes.
Me too.
There's no more questions coming in right now. So, Clea, I have to ask you, do you want to say anything else to the... wait a minute, one's popped up. I spoke too soon. We now have a question. And it is, from Catherine Apatuin to Clea, with your parents' love for watches, what do you look for when selecting a timepiece?
I wouldn't be my father's child without saying, timeliness, right? It's got to be an incredibly accurate watch. So that's probably my biggest go-to. And also that it's comfortable to wear, which Rolexes are very comfortable to wear. Certainly the older models, the newer ones, frankly, are a little heavy for me. But it's just me. But and that they're not so complicated to use that I need to go out and get a degree on how to use it. So unfortunately, I'm not the most technical person in the world, so it needs to be kind of easy for me to use.
Yes. Well, Clea, I'm sure Paul would be able to point you in the direction of an excellent watch, an excellent vintage watch that's very accurate, very timely. I'm sure he'd enjoy doing that. He'd have no problems with it at all.
Great pleasure, absolutely.
It's gonna be a long search.
Well, those are always the best kinds of searches, Part of the fun is the hunt.
The most fun is the hunt.
Yes, absolutely, I know.
Do we have time for any more questions, or is our technical people about to tell us we have to sign off?
Yeah, I'm getting the eye here.
Uh-oh.
So am I, actually. Well, Clea,
yes.
Immeasurable thanks for speaking with us this evening.
Thank you.
And I do hope the watch does you proud and does your mother and father proud on Saturday.
Me too.
Okay.
Thank
and
you so much.
I've been sitting here admiring all the photographs behind you, by the way. It's quite an impressive collection from what I can see.
Well, this is an incredibly neat place to stay. I'm actually staying in the barn at my mom and dad's house, and it's actually, this portion of the barn was actually our projection room, and so that's why this whole wall, there's no window in it, so that it was dark so that you could show films, and it's just like it's all historical. They're just like all these amazing photographs of family and friends and artists and, dad racing. Actually, I don't know if you can see, I don't want to knock over it, but can you see Dad's car up there?
Yes.
That's the one in the video. But yeah, that's
super cool.
That is very cool. What a great place to stay.
It is. It's an amazing place to stay. And actually, this is where my husband and I got married. So it holds a lot of wonderful memories for me. And, my parents, my dad, the funniest thing about my father, first of all, of course, his whole timeliness. But when we showed films, way back when, he obviously with Newman's Own, he had this whole popcorn, you know, he was addicted to popcorn, and he was very particular about the popcorn. And he would spend, there's actually a kitchen here, and he would spend an inordinate amount of time making the popcorn. And he always put like tons of butter and salt on it. And you know, it was almost inedible, but he loved it.
Sounds like I would love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
We would literally, he would make one, you know, the one huge pot of popcorn that wasn't over salted and over buttered. And that was for the rest of us. And then he would make this huge thing for himself. Every time I walk in here, I have this feeling that I have to make popcorn, or I want popcorn, or you know, it's very strange.
Anytime I go to see a movie, I have to have popcorn.
Oh, I'm so old school. I have to have popcorn.
Got to have a lot of butter.
And it's got to have a lot of butter. I once went to the movies in Boston a few years ago, and there was somebody with this huge bucket of popcorn, and she was standing next to those dispensers where you press a button and the butter, or the fake butter actually, comes oozing out and goes all over the popcorn. And she turned to her friend and said, "How much heart attack do you want on this popcorn?"
You guys are making me hungry.
I know, me too. Yeah. Me too.
Well, okay. I do think we've come to our time limit now. So once again, Clea, thanks a million for everything you're doing. Mr. Boutros, as always, it's a pleasure to see you.
Mr. Clerizo, thank you for being a great host and moderator. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Here's your applause. Here's your applause.
Thank you. I'll be signing autographs later. But there's only a security guard here now, so I don't think there'll be much of a demand. And I'll be watching on Saturday.
Yeah, tune in, everyone. And Phillips.com, Saturday morning, Eastern time, 10 a.m., 4 p.m. European time. And best of luck to all our bidders, and we hope you enjoy the show. And best of luck, Clea. We thank you so much for your trust. And Michael, thank you, as always, to you and WSJ Magazine for your wonderful support.
And let's hear a round of applause for WSJ. There we go. Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And
everyone.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye-bye.